Okay, here we go. On behalf of the Whitworth OTD class of 2025, our inaugural cohort, we want to take a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to the faculty who have guided, challenged, and championed us from day one here. Dr. Helgeson, our program director, your leadership has laid the foundation for this program that will be for years to come. We are honored to present you this frame, Whitworth OTD Inaugural 2025, with a picture of our cohort from graduation. We hope it serves as a small reminder of the impact you've had in shaping this group and the future occupational therapists. And to all 6 of our incredible faculty, thank you. Each of you have played a unique role in our growth, both professionally and personally. We have a small symbolic gift, a rock engraved OTD 2025 with a pine cone, representing our strength, resilience, rooted here at Whitworth. So this can go outside of our building. Yes. That is it. Yep. This program has been more than education, it's been transformation, so we're so grateful for all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. You can probably stay up there. Okay. Oh, yeah. Go take a seat. We're going to mic the provost.
Oh, John, you're coming.
All right.
Can I use that for? This is a handhold.
You want to see that?
Yeah. And here, I'm a little froggy, so I apologize. Friends, it is so wonderful to be here with you today and celebrate you. Really exciting. I can speak a little bit for my colleague, Dr. Mike Ediger, that we dreamed of this program in little rooms over coffee, late at night over emails, through endless hiring committees and building walkthroughs, and if I remember correctly, mezzanines and sinks. That was a real deep concern for us, is would we have enough sinks in the building. And as a professor of English, one of the things that was so great about that process was it was a learning experience for me to understand the field and to see the important work that you all are going to do. So today is a celebration of your work over the last 3 years. But I want you to hear sincerely, you are the start of a dream that began almost 10 years ago now, so thank you. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Mann for your leadership. Today's program is most certainly a celebration of the work that our students have done, but this event emerges from her passion to see that each of our OTD graduates leaves this program confident in their capacities to serve communities as excellent clinicians, but also to forward the field as occupational therapist scholars. This is the both and reality of your work. You are clinicians and you are scholars. And it's that both and that informs my remarks today. For many of us, myself included, the work of research is challenging. The long hours creating the perfect trial or experiment, the time devoted to familiarizing ourselves with relevant literature, gathering data, writing up drafts, and then the seemingly endless hours of revision. It takes its toll, and for some of us, the work of scholarship reminds us that our first love is actually the practice of our discipline, working alongside patients and clients, watching their lives change as a result of the programs we develop for their particular needs. For others, research and scholarship has proven to be life-giving, an act of inspiration. It is the work of discovery, of adding one's voice to the professional conversation. It sparks imagination. To consider how one's ideas could potentially shape the future of a field so that patients are better served fuels those long nights of revision and recalibration. And yet, as we know, we simply cannot divide our work into these easy categories of practitioner or researcher. These divisions are at best arbitrary, and at worst they obfuscate the reality of your work. The both and of what it means to be an OTD. You must challenge yourself to stay aware of the latest scholarship of what's happening in research. You have to keep your mind sharp. Not only that, the field will need your contributions to ensure that we continue to move forward. Moreover, you must continue to also quite literally stay in touch with the practices in your field, to remain anchored to the reality that your expertise helps change the material and physical lives of those with whom you come into contact. In short, as has been the mission of this program, you must remain steadfast in your pursuit of being a professional that is anchored in both the mind and heart reality of your work. Our program has been committed to this belief from its inception, and we could not be more proud of you, the first cohort of this incredible program, who are going to go into the world to serve others with your minds and your hearts and your hands. But there's one more encouragement, or more likely an exhortation today as we think about this. Talking about scholarship could potentially, from a provost, like the provost is going to talk about scholarship, maybe is like the most boring sentence in like the universe, right? And so as I was thinking about that, I wanted to leave you with an encouragement or an exhortation, particularly about your work as researchers, people moving the field forward. Every act of scholarship is an act of rebellion and an act of hope. Rebellion in the sense that our work as researchers, as thinkers, pushes on the status quo to say, what more is possible? What have we not considered? What have we not looked at? And sometimes that requires you to bang your head against the wall for long hours, to push against ideas that have become so part of the practice that we can't seem to see past them. Discovery is often born out of this act of rebellion to say there may be another way to see things. And each act of rebellion is because of hope. That what you discover, that what you put together, that what you present to your colleagues, that what you do in the field, that those things matter because they are potentials for serving people better, to see what isn't even possible yet. And so as you think today, as you go into the world, I want you to remember that your work is always an act of rebellion and hope. And I can't think of nothing better than you all heading out into the world and reminding folks and letting folks see in some ways for the first time just what it means to be a Whitworth OTD. And so on behalf of the academic leadership of the university, the Board of Trustees, I am so grateful for each of you, and I hope that you will come and visit us every now and again. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Pell. At this time, it's my pleasure to bring Dr. Dean Ettinger to the pit.
Welcome, everyone. What a fun morning this is going to be. I am super excited to see all the presentations. To our presenters, first, I want to welcome you back to campus. I haven't seen you since graduation, but it's nice to have you back. I have a question before I say a few words, and that is, being the original six, did y'all ever give yourself a nickname? Did you call it? You did. Okay, what was it? I'm just curious. The Founding Fathers. Nice. Yeah, right. I wasn't sure if you did, but if you're a fan of Survivor or Big Brother or any of those competition shows, whenever a group gets together, they often go, okay, here's our nickname and here's what we're going to do as we move forward. So I thought if you hadn't, I wasn't sure, I was going to give you a couple options. The first, maybe the Whitworth OGOTs. I thought that kind of had a ring to it. Maybe the Sixth Sense, if you're a movie buff a little bit. Or kind of my favorite, the Six Pack. Kind of reminded me of the Brat Pack, or I don't know, there's a variety of different ways. If you were a math nerd, I was going to think the Hex Pack, but that didn't ring as well as the Six Pack, so I don't know if there are any math nerds in the house. But either way, I thought I would offer a few, well, even without the nickname, you six have had a lot of firsts in the program. But maybe the most significant first for the School of Health Sciences and the OT program is that you've had the opportunity to create the standard in our school and in our program in everything that you've done. You have been the first to go through every class. You have been the first to go into the community. You have been the first to graduate, and now you're the first to present your capstone research. In the community, you did as our first students to go out in your field work, and you defined what excellence is going to look like from Whitworth occupational therapy students. Our reputation academically and clinically is literally being built on your shoulders, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not. And that's exciting for us because I know who you are and I've seen you grow over the last 3 years. Today is your final hurdle as students and signifies that, in fact, you are no longer students, but you have become true practice scholars. We're here today to celebrate your work, to learn from you, and to acknowledge that you are now colleagues. What a privilege and an honor it is going to be today to learn from you, to have that reverse. You're no longer learning from your faculty, you are teaching us. It's a privilege and an honor, and I can't overstate how important you are to this school and to what we are building in the health science community, both locally and regionally. The mission of the university has always been an education of mind and heart, equipping graduates to honor God, follow Christ, and serve humanity. Mind and heart, serving humanity. In the school, we added a few words to it, but keeping that same mission. Our program mission, our school mission, is academic and clinical excellence delivered with an education of mind, heart, delivered through your hands as you go out literally and figuratively into the community. These capstone projects perfectly exemplify this mission. These projects demonstrate the academic foundation that has allowed you to examine clinical challenges and propose solutions or ideas that will advance your profession and literally change the lives of the people that you are serving. So congratulations on the several years of hard work that has led up to today and that has gone into these projects. I'm going to confess that when we made the decision to start the occupational therapy program, as Dr. Pell said, almost a decade ago, and as we had the conversations about what the program will look like and about how many sinks we needed in Dornsife, I will admit that I didn't know as much about OT as I thought I did. I thought I understood what we were doing. I thought I understood what we were building. I'd worked with OTs for years. But through watching our faculty build this program and watching you all go through it and grow over the last few years, I have also grown in my appreciation for what occupational therapy is and the impact that it can have on people's lives. I've grown in my appreciation for understanding the impact that you can have on people's lives. When people lose the ability to experience the world in a way that is meaningful to them through injury, disease, or dysfunction, it can have a devastating impact on every aspect of their life and well-being. And I've come to appreciate that occupational therapy is one of the most impactful disciplines that can come alongside individuals, enrich their lives, and help them discover ways that they can meaningfully find purpose, joy, and quality of life in everyday activities or everyday occupations. And what you are showing us here today is that you understood the assignment. You've understood and become academics and professionals that can competently blend the art and science of what it means to serve humanity through your academic and professional training. You are showing that you can do it with empathy and creativity and resilience. While you're at the beginning of your journey as a professional, today you're actually advancing the profession of occupational therapy through practice and through education and through research to better serve humanity. And for any OTs in the room, if that last sentence sounded a little bit familiar, even if a bit paraphrased, it's because that is the mission of the AOTA and your profession. You are fulfilling that mission today. And again, I think you all understood the assignment, and I'm very proud to have you represent Whitworth University and the School of Health Sciences. So today marks a significant step in your journey and in our journey as our school is developed. In your journey as a practice scholar, you confidently take that step into the next chapter and remember that the profession is more than a job. I want you to know that you have a chance to empower the lives of others to live more fully, more independent lives. So stay curious, stay compassionate, never underestimate the difference you can make in someone's everyday world. The OT profession and your clients need your energy, your fresh perspective, and your heart. You are the original six. You're the founding fathers. You're the OGs. You're the six-pack. And today, part of your legacy sets the bar for all future cohorts. Thank you for doing that so well.
Thank you, Dr. Ettinger, for those remarks. We're going to have a little transition. We have to mic up all our speakers. For those of you that don't know, we're live streaming and also recording so that you'll be able to listen to these whenever you like for the rest of your lives. All right, so our first presenter today is Sophia Sumner. Since the beginning of her doctoral journey, Sophia has demonstrated a clear and unwavering passion for working with high-risk infants. Through a strong collaboration with her site mentor, Dr. Lisa Olson, and with the support of Banner Health Systems, Sophia's doctoral capstone experience offered an exceptional opportunity for immersive neonatal intensive care unit specific education and clinical engagement. Please welcome Sophia.
All right, hello, my name is Sophia Sumner, and I am going to be presenting on my doctoral capstone experience in a highly specialized setting, and I was in the NICU, so that is kind of the specialized setting that I'm going to be focusing on today. I am hoping to publish my manuscript that is on my experience in the NICU in the Journal of Occupational Therapy Education, hopefully very soon. It's all ready, just got to go through the peer review process. I would like to thank some of my faculty members for their support, Kate Erickson, Dr. Mann, and then my community site mentor, who was the occupational therapist who was willing to take me as a student into the NICU, Dr. Lisa Olson. And I would also like to thank Dr. Christy Gliniak for helping me get into the neonatal world and kind of start this journey for me. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. All right, so there's a strong interest among OT students to gain NICU experience, yet the opportunities remain scarce. My project explores how doctoral capstone experiences can serve as a pathway to close this access and workforce gap. So this is kind of just the key points of my abstract that will be in the paper that you hopefully can soon read later. My key topics, so I'm going to explain kind of the NICU as a specialized setting, the gaps that I have discovered throughout my process before and during my experience, how I designed this experience to become immersed and accepted into this specialized setting, and the goals that I accomplished in my time there. So NICUs, as we said before, are highly complex environments where the student access is restricted due to the fragility of the clients and the advanced clinical skills that are required to be in this setting. However, this is a very critical setting for practitioners that would want to be getting into the neonatal care, so you must have experience not only with those advanced clinical skills, but knowledge of the interdisciplinary team, the family collaboration, trauma-informed care, and a bunch of other different models that are specific to neonatal therapy care that are not often discussed in OT education because it is a specialty area. So the doctoral capstone experience is unique to our entry-level doctoral programs, and it supports the advancement of advanced skills and allows students to have those in-depth focus on a specialty area that they wish to pursue. Most often when a student wants to complete their capstone in a specialized area, clinical practice skills is usually the focus because this is an area that they weren't able to get in their field work. So they weren't given the option or the opportunity to do this in their field work. So we want to be able to gain those hands-on clinical practice skills to be able to have that going into our future career. So for 14 weeks, I was in Arizona at Whitworth University Medical Center in a level 3 65-bed NICU. During that time, I was able to accomplish a lot. I started from shadowing, kind of working with my mentor, both in hands-on, kind of observing, assessing what we were seeing, and then also doing some additional work kind of outside of the bedside care. So I can say that I was able to progress and work independently under the supervision of my mentor, providing different interventions, splinting, infant massage, developmental care, learning about all the different developmental equipment used to prevent things like plagiocephaly or your head shape. And I was able to kind of compare myself to the national competencies of the neonatal therapist and be independent in handling infants 30 weeks gestation and above from admission to discharge. Granted, I did get to see a 22-weeker and had experience with 24-weekers and up, but looking at completely from admission to discharge, I can say that I am independent 30 weeks and up. I also had the opportunity to have that interprofessional communication and collaboration with neonatologists, nurses, speech therapists, respiratory therapists, lactation specialists, the whole team, and it was really great for me to actually get the opportunity to be a part of those team meetings and share my insight. I also got to be able to work with, practice kind of my therapeutic use of self with families and caregivers, giving them education, training, and working one-on-one with their infant and the families. An additional project that I volunteered to take on was implementing cycle lighting into this unit. They had kind of tried to establish it beforehand, but the unit, each room had different setups for their environment and their lighting, so I went through and measured the lux of all of the rooms and went and put signs up for everybody and then made a PowerPoint, and I was able to kind of educate the staff and explain to them why the importance of this is, because they knew the importance of cycled lighting, but not fully to what we know to be backed up by evidence. So I was able to do that, and I just talked with Dr. Olson, and it's still currently being used, and it's going great. So planning for the doctoral capstone experience begins with a literature review and a gap analysis as part of the required needs assessment. My capstone identified 2 key gaps: a lack of training models for students entering the NICU, and then the presence of implicit and explicit bias against new providers, which can impact learning and collaboration. Scaffolding exposure before the DCE planning even starts prepares students for the NICU. So my own path included early intervention experiences and attending the National Association of Neonatal Therapists conferences, which led to kind of the groundwork for my NICU placement. For example, if a student is coming right into it and wanting to be into the NICU or any specialized setting, I would look at the research to see what they recommend for other placements that you can get into that can help build those groundwork of skills. So for getting into the NICU, some research is backed up by this, and NANT also supports this, that getting into the ICU, acute care, or early intervention will kind of help lay those foundational skills and be able to kind of learn some of the high risk and high specialized areas that you aren't getting in if you aren't able to be in those actual highly specialized settings. Granted, the ICU is also, can be difficult to get into, but it is important to learn those skills of the lines and monitoring and all of those little things that maybe aren't in some of the settings that we would most likely be in. And I can say that that first statement up there, the barriers to my involvement were overcome. I was able to kind of have all this early scaffolding, staff support, and I was able to complete this with pretty successfully, I would say. So the conference that I was just talking about, the National Association of Neonatal Therapists, is an additional support that I use since maybe I wasn't able to be into the ICU, just to kind of help expand my clinical knowledge beyond what I was taught in OT education to feel like I can be more prepared. This not only taught me just the NICU specific terminology, the emerging best practices, but I was also able to talk with other therapists and network, and that is how I met my mentor and was able to pick out a site and the mentor for that capstone experience. So going to some of these events is where you're going to be immersed in all of these therapists in the neonatal world, so I would definitely recommend taking any opportunities to go into these additional conferences or continuing education to kind of network and get to know other people in that field that might be willing to take you as a student, because it can be hard to find someone who is willing to take a student in the specialized settings. I want to start with how the structured mentorship really helped me and solidified kind of what I should be looking for, like when entering a room. It was very important when planning this that we created goals. We had meetings with my mentor of kind of what I wanted to get out of it and what she wanted to get out of it. That way we had the same expectations of what I was looking for, because every student is going to have different levels of knowledge. So my experience might look different than someone who didn't attend the NAT conference and maybe needs to have a lot more time not being hands-on in the room to be able to understand the terminology and equipment before going in. So we kind of developed and had discussions, open-ended conversations about what I'm needing and where we can kind of move forward. It allowed me to build confidence and competence, kind of starting with those early sessions of observation and then going into active participation with NICU's specific developmental needs. As I kind of progressed, students are expected to be able to articulate what they are observing, assessing, hypothesizing during that patient care, and actively engaging with the site mentor to make sure they are seeing everything that they should. And so some of those foundational frameworks that I listed are specific to neonatal therapy, the synactive theory, the universe of developmental care. There's a list more, and you can find that in the NANT website as well. But those kind of helped me differentiate my clinical knowledge just from being in OT school and then going into this of knowing what I should be looking for when I'm entering a room. Very helpful to kind of do that beforehand. It really shaped how I looked at babies differently. And it is important sometimes, like all settings, the NICU can be a little repetitive, and so to prevent any repetition or that unable to kind of progress those skills and gain different sort of interventions and treatments, it's important to plan ahead when seeing, okay, we want to see a 24-week baby in this, we want to see someone on this specific respiratory support, so that we can plan that in advance to make sure I'm meeting those skills. And that can be done day to day, per week. We've had debriefing sessions every single day, so we were very close, and it's not like I was feeling like I was not getting met by something. You have 14 weeks together, so you get to develop that relationship. And then when possible, matching students with mentors who have advanced credentials such as the certified neonatal therapist status, that kind of is just a special advancement that can help differentiate, maybe also make the mentor feel more competent when having a student as well. That could be a whole other paper as well. Yeah. So the implications are my main point. The doctoral capstone experience can create stronger academic clinical partnerships, which, combining all of those clear expectations, the diverse learning opportunities, the consistent communication, and that structured mentorship, can strengthen the preparation of future NICU occupational therapists to support safe, high-quality care for these infants and their families. And the overarching AOTA expectations for entry-level occupational therapy doctoral programs includes paving the way for the advancement of the profession through the development of practice scholars. So throughout all of this, I feel like I was able to kind of address some of those workforce and shortages in neonatal care by having that pathway to allow students to be in these environments while keeping the environment safe for both parties and promoting that family-centered evidence-based care. By investing in student learning now, the profession can proactively address the workforce gaps and ensure the future generations of therapists are prepared to meet the growing demand of high-quality neonatal care. Through the innovative education models, the strong academic clinical partnerships, and a commitment to mentorship, these entry-level occupational therapy doctoral programs can expand neonatal-focused education and continue to advance family-centered outcomes. These steps will strengthen the workforce of NICU-ready practitioners and ultimately advance the outcomes for infants. I'd say future research and collaboration is recommended to advance the understanding of how we can best design, develop, and utilize the doctoral capstone experience for these students who are showing that interest in these specialized settings and clinical environments. And again, I would just like my personal outcomes of this as I was able to kind of meet those national competencies for neonatal therapies. And let's see, I don't want to make sure I can, I don't want to, here, can you, how do I scroll down this? How do I scroll down on, oh. No, oh, there we go. The mouse was over there. Okay, and I just wanted to also say that having this experience gives me a distinct advantage into entering the future workforce of the NICU. So, yes. And if you would like to see my references, I have them. They didn't fit on this page, so there's a long list, but it will be published soon. So reach out to me if you would like my references. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, just for the audio, Dr. Fitzgerald is asking about some of the nuances of using the capstone and coordinating with the fieldwork settings.
You guys hear me okay? Okay, there we go. I've only known one student who I met actually at the NANT conference to have a level 2 fieldwork, so it wasn't to my understanding that there were actually students still being accepted into the level 2 fieldworks. I think that would be great. I feel like my experience was probably better doing it in the capstone, just because I think fieldworks are really based off of that pass-fail, and it can be hard to, put that pressure on somebody when we haven't maybe had as much education as to be able to make those decisions and have that pass-fail. I think for me, I probably could have done that, but that was because I did the extra additional outside work. So I think it can be going somewhere. I know Dr. Bobby Pineda is working on maybe developing an educational model that can be used in programs potentially that is specific to neonatal therapy for OTD programs. I don't know that will be coming down the road, but I think that is kind of the difference that can maybe allow fieldwork twos to be considered into the setting. And then to address the NANT, if students need to do that or be in the ICU, I mean, it is an expensive conference, so if they're able to, there's student rates, which were very helpful for me since I did go to it, attend it all 3 years, and I don't think it's too early. I went my first year and I got some feedback from therapists there thinking that maybe I was doing it too early, and then the other end where it's good to just get in there and learn and kind of start that. So if able to, I would say, obviously not pressuring them to go into that, but if able and they're wanting to and they have that passion already, that's kind of a good way to get into it. And even if they aren't sure, I would say going to the NANT conference can kind of help you determine if this is really something you would like to get into, because it has the therapist's perspectives on how it's like culturally to be in the NICU, but then also kind of learning about the specific nuances of the care there. But did I answer everything? Okay. All right.
To add a couple notes, the significance of Sophia's work is governing doctoral capstone experience. Governing the capstone experience and helping students to access these environments that typically we cannot get them into because they don't have appropriate experiences. There's safety concerns that are legitimate. So her work really is, we feel, very important and foundational in maybe helping other programs start to develop capstones with this goal in mind. If we're really going to transform practice, then we really need doctoral students to be willing to forge these new frontiers, and we also need programs that are willing to do the work to develop those relationships and create the pathways for those students to go down. So we're really hoping that this work gets published. If not in our first choice, we won't give up. Right? We have second and third choices. That's the world of the scholar, the practice scholar, as you know, right? And then the other thing I just want to share, without giving away details because nothing is certain, but Sophia's already been given opportunities to enter a NICU upon graduation. Completely unheard of. I mean, so it's the proof's in the pudding. She had a goal to create a pathway to work in this environment, and because of the Whitworth program and the capstone experience, we were able to help her forge that path to actually get there. On average, it would take a new grad, what do you think, Sophia, about 5 years, 3 to 5 years to get into a position like that. So we will be sending her students to further that work, I'm sure, at some point in the future. Hold on, my mouse is not. I can't get my mouse to, can you get it to go up there? There, I saw it down there. Here it is. While we're working on our technical issues, our next presenter is Ashley Surrey. Ashley's capstone work reflects a deep commitment to enhancing outcomes for school-age children through innovative occupational therapy practices. Inspired by her site mentor, Miley Mosenian, and supported by Empire Therapy, Ashley has focused on developing advanced skills in the integration of retained reflexes, a specialized area with the potential to make a meaningful impact in school-based occupational therapy and the academic participation of elementary-age students. Her work over the past several months demonstrates both clinical depth and forward-thinking application. Please join me in welcoming Ashley.
Okay. Sure.
I turned mine off, so there should be good.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hello everyone, thank you all for being here. My name is Ashley, and today I will be presenting on my capstone project, which is titled Supporting Neurological Readiness for Learning, a Classroom-Based Reflex Integration Approach for Title I Elementary Schools. The goal is to submit this as a manuscript to the Journal of Occupational Therapy, Schools, and Early Intervention within the next few weeks. I would like to thank my many community sites and faculty mentors who have helped me develop this research and get to this point, specifically Empire Therapy and the Spokane Public School District, my expertise mentor, Miley Mosenian, and my faculty mentors here at Whitworth, Dr. Katie Erickson, and of course, Dr. Donna Mann, our Doctoral Capstone Coordinator. Their continuous feedback, encouragement, and expertise throughout these few years have really helped me complete this research project. Today, I will be talking about a few key topics, including the role of primitive reflexes, the impact of early childhood trauma, the connection between primitive reflexes, trauma, and academic challenges, why I specifically chose Title I elementary schools as my primary focus, and the purpose of this research, and why I decided a program was the solution to create at the end of all of this research. I will also discuss all of the data sources and how I collected that data, how I analyzed it, and the professional development and training I underwent in order to accurately analyze and create this program. For the program, I will give a short overview as well as an example and discuss the guiding principles and frameworks that helped to underlie this program. And then I will discuss the outcomes. This work focused on 3 primary objectives. The first was to examine the theoretical and empirical foundations that link trauma, poverty, and retain primitive reflexes. The second principle was to observe and analyze the student educational performance patterns in Title I elementary school settings. And the third was to create a classroom-based movement program tailored to address students' unique academic and behavioral challenges through an evidence-based neurodevelopmental approach. Beginning at the background, the first facet of this research was to understand primitive reflexes and their role in development. So primitive reflexes are automatic involuntary movement patterns that emerge during fetal development to serve as neonatal survival support and as neurological building blocks for higher level motor control, sensory processing, and cognitive development. The reflexes originate in the brainstem and subcortical brain regions, which function to regulate basic survival functioning and early sensory motor activity. And each primitive reflex functions distinctly to support various aspects of motor coordination and cognitive development. Under typical developmental conditions, these primitive reflexes should integrate or inhibit within the first year of life to allow the brain to become more developed in order to allow for the emergence of more complex motor patterns and cognitive processes. However, primitive reflexes that remain active beyond this natural integration period often indicates an underlying neurological immaturity and may therefore contribute to various neurodevelopmental challenges. This is referred to as retained primitive reflexes. The second facet of this research was understanding the impact of trauma on the brain. So early childhood is a critical time for brain development, where approximately 90% of the brain size and structure are established by age 5, where critical neural connections are able to be formed during those influential years. This is also the time when the brain is able to respond to environmental input and demonstrates huge amounts of neuroplasticity. However, exposure to adversity within this early childhood period, including things like poverty, neglect, and inconsistent caregiving, significantly limit the formation of neural pathways and impairs typical cognitive development. We often hear of this type of early childhood trauma referred to as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, which is defined as a child's prolonged exposure to potentially traumatic events, which can trigger adaptive changes in the body's stress response system. Without protective factors, cumulative toxic stress can cause significant structural and functional changes in neural architecture, specifically affecting the brainstem and subcortical brain regions, which we know from the last slide plays a huge impact on our survival mechanisms and early sensory motor activity. We also know that trauma's impact on the brain and subcortical brain regions has a direct impact on primitive reflex integration processes. Therefore, this direct impact on the brain can have further impacts on foundational skills needed for educational engagement, especially in younger students, because of where the brain is impacted and where primitive reflexes are integrated. When these retained primitive reflexes persist into early childhood, they can interfere with higher level cortical functioning and hinder participation in daily occupations, such as being able to participate in classroom learning, create meaningful peer interactions, and overall have self-regulation that they need in order to focus within the classroom. This retention is often observable through the delays in foundational skills like posture, hand-eye coordination, sustained attention, and self-regulation. And while these primitive reflexes are meant to support brain and body development, their persistence in school-age children can create significant barriers to classroom engagement and overall academic success. So why did I choose Title I elementary schools? When we look at trauma, or how trauma is categorized, we know there are a variety of different ways that you can categorize trauma. However, what we also know is that what impacts one may not impact the other, despite it being categorized as the same thing. So for my research, I specifically dove into poverty-related trauma. Therefore, I chose Title I elementary schools because Title I elementary schools serve predominantly low-income student populations. This location and population also presented additional unique challenges where trauma was often compounded by environmental stressors like food insecurity, housing instability, neighborhood violence, and inconsistent caregiving. Children who live in poverty also face compounded developmental risks due to reduced access to adequate and nutritious foods, limited exposure to enriching learning environments, and fewer opportunities for structured extracurricular activities. Consequently, children who have experienced trauma, especially poverty-related trauma, face heightened risks of retained primitive reflexes due to the impact that trauma has on the brain. The complexity of these challenges is also further exacerbated by systemic barriers to accessing interventions. So for many students in low-income communities, they lack access to private therapeutic services and comprehensive neurodevelopmental screenings. And while some students may qualify for school-based services like OT, PT, or speech, many of those who present with mild or undiagnosed neurodevelopmental challenges, including retained primitive reflexes, are often overlooked or fail to meet the qualification criteria. Additionally, support services, again OT, PT, speech, often have caseloads that are so full they're unable to serve all students and can only serve the students who present with direct challenges that are present on eligibility criteria. Therefore, we have a huge gap of students who are in need of support, especially within the school systems, but are not able to get that support because they're unable to meet the eligibility criteria or receive private outpatient services. Why does all this matter? Existing school-based interventions that target these behavioral and academic challenges typically fail to address the underlying neurological root causes, and those students presenting with these undiagnosed neurodevelopmental challenges are often overlooked. This leads to frequent behavioral outbursts, limited task persistence and attention, sensory dysregulation, all things that are often dismissed as defiance or misconduct, which leads to reprimands. However, it's my goal to change that narrative that labels these behaviors as defiant and instead to begin to help others recognize and then remediate the potential neurological immaturity that is caused by early adversity and therefore underlies these classroom challenges. Without this remediation, we will continue to see additional strain placed on educators to manage these complex and unique neurodevelopmental needs of students, however, with limited knowledge and very limited and insufficient resources. And as a result, students are at risk of academic and social disengagement as we begin to see more delays in school readiness, behavioral regulation challenges, increased time out of the classroom due to reprimands and being sent to the principal or counselor's office, and overall long-term academic underachievement. So the purpose of my research and my work was to address a significant gap in current research and intervention practices by presenting a framework designed to reduce educational barriers, enhance school engagement, and improve overall learning outcomes, particularly in these Title I classroom settings. By identifying and targeting the neurodevelopmental processes most often affected by early childhood adversity, we can then begin to implement appropriate intervention strategies to prevent further challenges for students who have faced and experienced prolonged adversity. By understanding the complex intersection of poverty-related trauma and retained primitive reflexes, we can more effectively address the needs of students within these low-income school environments. In response to this critical need, I created a classroom-based movement program grounded in primitive reflex integration principles and OT theory. And unlike traditional clinic-based models that require specialized one-on-one therapy sessions, the school-based intervention is designed for educator accessibility and implementation within existing classroom structures and schedules. Looking at the methods. Given the complex and highly individualized nature of trauma and neurodevelopment, I chose a qualitative observational approach as my primary methodology to understanding patterns of student regulation, behavior, and participation within the classroom setting. These observations included observations within classrooms and school-based OT sessions to observe sensory, motor, and behavioral presentations that currently hinder students' performance and engagement within the classroom. The second data source I used was analyzing state-level data to further examine the relationship between socioeconomic factors and academic readiness. This analysis focused on 4 main metrics, including kindergarten readiness scores, the percentage of students showing foundational grade-level knowledge, discipline rates, and attendance rates. I was then able to take this information and compare it against non-Title I schools to get a more clear idea and correlation between socioeconomic disadvantage and currently available academic supports, as well as student developmental readiness patterns. These findings further provided additional support needed for the rationale to create an evidence-based intervention that could be directly designed and implemented at the classroom level. My third data source was informal interviews with educators, including teachers, school psychologists, school counselors, and other resource support personnel in order to understand observable trends in behaviors, response to intervention strategy effectiveness, and identified gaps in currently available systems of support. And the fourth data source was by attending formal IEP and 504 meetings in order to understand current management strategies and educator perceptions on student readiness. To analyze all of this data, I chose a thematic analysis approach, which allowed me to take all my observations, conversations, and field notes and identify recurring themes related to academic and behavioral challenges observed across student and classroom contexts. The emergent themes were then compared against documented manifestations of retained primitive reflexes, which is found in existing literature. And through this analysis, I found clear patterns of reflex-related needs, which provided further justification for creating this program, grounded in reflex integration principles. Additionally, to ensure clinical accuracy and therapeutic relevance throughout the program development process, I underwent 11 weeks of training with established professionals specializing in reflex integration practices. This included one-on-one mentorship, an extensive review of current literature on primitive reflexes and their developmental implications, and ongoing education in trauma-informed educational practices. These professional development opportunities established the foundational knowledge I needed in order to accurately translate observed behavioral patterns into more appropriate neurodevelopmental and reflex-related terminology. The training also informed the design of specific movement patterns that I used in the program to ensure they were based on developmental sequences and evidence-based reflex integration approaches. The development of this classroom-based movement program represented the systematic integration of neurodevelopmental and OT theories, research on early childhood trauma, and overall observational data that I collected from Title I elementary schools. The program was created in response to observed academic and behavioral patterns that significantly impacted student participation to their education, and then to support students' needs in an environment that already had limited resources and availability of support service providers. The foundation of this framework was built on 3 core principles to ensure both effectiveness and accessibility. The first principle, accessibility. This program was designed for general education settings, which enables students to access neurodevelopmental interventions without the need for specialized training or expensive private outpatient therapeutic services. The approach also hopes to ensure a more equitable access, regardless of formal diagnosis or school-based service eligibility. The second principle was neurodevelopmental alignment. Each movement targets specific primitive reflexes that may underlie these behavioral and academic challenges, encouraging reflex integration and supporting neurodevelopmental maturation processes within the classroom. And the third principle was trauma-informed practice. The program utilizes predictable rhythmic movement patterns to promote nervous system regulation. It's designed to include elements of co-regulation and peer mirroring to support social bonding and create feelings of safety within the classroom. And the third was the ability to engage mirror neurons for students who may feel that who may not feel comfortable doing these movements with the class, or who are unable to, whether physically or for other reasons, to participate. This allows students to gain similar benefits just from observing their peers completing these movement patterns. The culmination of all of this resulted in the development of an 8-movement classroom-based movement program, with each movement specifically linked to particular primitive reflexes that impact student academic performance. The program is designed to promote primitive reflex integration, support behavioral regulation, and enhance learning readiness within typical classroom environments without the need for specialized training or equipment. Here is an example of one of the pages from the program. This is the 8th movement. Each page has an image that students can follow along with, instructions that allow the teacher to present these movements to their class and help them learn about the movements. It also discusses primitive reflexes that are specifically targeted, so if teachers want to understand more about the implications of each primitive reflex, they have an idea of where to look to. And it also discusses the educational impact that integrating these primitive reflexes can have on their students, both academically and behaviorally. So the purpose of this study was to investigate the relationship between early childhood adversity, retained primitive reflexes, and academic performance challenges in elementary age students. Through this process, this program was developed to support the integration of primitive reflexes and promote neurological readiness for learning. Through this exploration, it revealed a critical need and complex intersection between trauma, neurodevelopmental alterations, and academic performance challenges. The observations that I conducted consistently revealed the pervasive nature and occurrence of reflex-related challenges that frequently undermined the sensory, motor, and behavioral foundations that were essential for academic success. And the observations strongly supported the growing body of literature to suggest that chronic stress has a huge impact on our brain, especially during those times of brain development, with particular implications on regulation, motor coordination, and executive functioning. And despite all of the documented links between trauma and neurodevelopmental delays, most low-income communities and school settings continue to lack the adequate resources needed for addressing these unique needs within the classroom. And as traditional reflex integration programs remain primarily clinic-based, these services become vastly inaccessible to those students in low-income communities where barriers such as time, cost, and transportation persist. Therefore, there remains a critical need for an accessible school-based intervention to address these challenges at their neurological root. So the classroom-based movement program was created as a direct response to the systemic service gaps and access barriers. My goal is to translate complex neurological concepts into clear, structured movement patterns to offer a practical and developmentally appropriate approach to addressing retained primitive reflexes within the school day. The approach goes beyond just managing the surface-level behaviors and instead targets the neurological root cause of the classroom challenges. And in doing so, again, I hope that it has the potential to change the common view that labels these behaviors as defiant and instead begins to support the recognition and remediation of potential neurological immaturity that has been caused by this early adversity. Additionally, this intervention strongly supports and reflects OT's core commitment to promoting participation in meaningful activities by reducing environmental barriers while also providing tools for improved access and engagement. And while this program has not yet been implemented into the school systems yet, the framework is intended for future classroom implementation in order to further evaluate and establish its effectiveness and refine its application to further support more students. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Questions for Ashley?
Ashley, thank you for this presentation. It's very exciting work that you are doing. I wondered what your vision for the classroom model would be. Is it a prescribed time of day or a prescribed class that this would be happening in? Or is this whenever the teacher, maybe PRN decides that it's necessary? What's the vision for the implementation?
My goal is that it allows the teachers to decide when is the best time in their classroom. There are a variety of different movements, some that may not be the most feasible in the classroom, like crawling. And my goal is that I could teach PE teachers this so that they could use it at the beginning of their PE sessions to help regulate the body and promote that bilateral coordination. And so each movement could be done in the classroom. The overall program is about 25 pages, and it has suggested movement routines. So different movements you can do before lunch or before a test to reduce anxiety, or at the beginning of the day to help with alertness. And each of those routines is only 2 to 3 movements long, and each movement only takes about less than 30 seconds. And so my goal is that if they're standing in line for waiting for the music room to open, they can do one while they're lined up against, the wall, and it's still very quiet. Or they can do it at the beginning of the classroom. So there's a lot of different options, but I don't know how every classroom is run, and so my goal is that teachers can really take each movement and decide how it would best fit their students. And also, none of the movements are like, you have to do these. I hope that teachers, as they begin to understand how reflexes work, they can decide which movement patterns and integrating which reflexes would help their students the most. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
If you would like to look at Ashley's program, we've put a copy at the back of the room, along with copies of each of the manuscripts that the soon-to-be doctors have written. All right. Our next presenter is Haley Summerday. Yeah, thank you. Like many occupational therapy students and professionals, Haley has explored a wide range of practice areas during her doctoral journey. It's been a running joke. What's the topic today? It was during the American Occupational Therapy Association National Conference that she found a strong and lasting interest in modernizing school-based OT practices. Recognizing that meaningful change begins with a deep understanding of the systems you wish to influence, Haley dedicated her doctoral capstone experience to an ethnographic study exploring K-12 school culture, particularly as it relates to school-based services and referrals. This in-depth, context-sensitive work would not have been possible without the support of her site mentor, Dr. Connie Cleaver, and Educational Service District 101. Please welcome Haley. Slideshow.
Let me fix your mic. Oh, we got, sorry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Haley Summerday. My capstone project focused on understanding the K-12 culture as related to school-based occupational therapy by employing an ethnographic study. I give many thanks to my community site mentor, Dr. Connie Kluver. She is the director of the Center for Special Education Services of Northeast Washington ESD 101, my faculty mentor, Dr. Bonnie Kirkpatrick, and then my doctoral capstone coordinator and co-author, Dr. Donna Mann. So the purpose of my project was to explore the culture of the interdisciplinary teams within the K-12 educational context and the cultural influences on school-based occupational therapy referral and service delivery. So today I'm going to go over where I hope to submit my manuscript to. I'm going to introduce the gap and kind of why I decided to focus on this, the materials and methods within my study, and then the results of that and the discussion, why it matters, and then the outcomes. So my goal is to submit in the Taylor & Francis Online Journal of Occupational Therapy Schools and Early Intervention, just like Ashley. So, clarifying the role of school-based occupational therapists. As we know, occupational therapy is grounded in principles of function, participation, and meaningful engagement, which uniquely suits it to support student success across academic, behavioral, and social-emotional domains. However, school-based occupational therapy remains inconsistently defined, understood, or implemented across schools and districts. So this often results in an underutilization or a narrow interpretation in practice. So my study used ethnography grounded in, or using a grounded theory approach. So ethnography is considered a powerful research methodology because it can provide systemic data on the perceptions, meanings, expectations, needs, and structures for actions among the group or culture that's being studied. And then grounded theory is an inductive process that involves the use of the data to establish a theory of a selected phenomenon in which the goal is to explain how and why events occur. So in this study, the phenomenon is defined as the school-based culture guiding referrals to special services in K-12 settings. The procedure for this study was to identify study sites with the help of my community mentor. So 3 schools were selected, a suburban school and then 2 rural schools. I spent 7 weeks in the first suburban school and then 7 weeks in the 2 rural schools collecting field notes. And all informants of this study were the K-12 personnel and then families of students within those selected settings. And my community site mentor provided full access and informed the informants to support the study through informal interviews and participation. So, my results, the data analysis of my field notes led to the development of 4 overarching themes, each with associated sub-themes that collectively reflected the cultural dynamics influencing school-based occupational therapy within those identified school districts. So the first theme that emerged was multi-tiered systems of support, so MTSS. This is defined as a proactive and preventative framework that integrates data and instruction to maximize student success from a strength-based perspective. The first sub-theme that emerged from this theme was the support for MTSS. So this is defined as the degree to which the school staff, administrators, and related service providers understand the framework, value its principles, and actively engage in the implementation. And a preference for this framework was evident in the study through that school-wide shared commitment to early intervention, the tiered service delivery, the data-driven decision-making, and the collaborative problem-solving to meet those diverse needs of all of the students. The next sub-theme was the frequency of the MTSS use. So this is defined as the various tier level use and includes these varying degrees of support. So tier 1 is school-wide programming for all students. Tier 2 is standardized interventions delivered in small groups for students who may need extra support in academics, behavior, or social-emotional domains. And then tier 3 is that individualized intensive intervention for students with those severe or persistent needs, often including students with disabilities. So this, in my study, tier 3 services were the most frequently used for delivering those school-based OT services, where that one-on-one pull-out method was delivered. The next sub-theme was the influence on MTSS on school-based occupational therapists. So this refers to the opportunity for OTs to contribute proactively and flexibly through this framework. This enables the school-based OTs to have a sense of professional empowerment and a greater recognition of OTs as experts in supporting those students' participation and function. The next theme that emerged from the data was team. So this includes educators, the school psychologist, the OTs, the PTs, speech language pathologist, school administrators, the student, and the student's family or guardians. The first sub-theme from this was team dynamics, which is defined as the interpersonal relationships, communication patterns, defined roles, and the collaborative processes. So the data revealed a strong emphasis for a collaborative approach rather than the siloed manner, and school-based OTs were viewed as those key team builders and collaborators. Parents were also identified as a sub-theme. So parents are defined as caregivers or guardians who hold the legal rights to their child's education and are responsible for supporting, advocating for, and participating in decision regarding their child's learning, development, and access to their education. So the data revealed a team breakdown, however, and a disconnect in collaboration between those parents and school teams. So this breakdown led to parental concern, frustration, and overall decreased satisfaction, which in turn negatively affected the follow-through on those agreed upon supports for the students. This then led to the team interpretation of parental action or inaction. So this is defined as how those educators, therapists, and other school-based professionals perceive and make meaning of those parent behaviors, whether those parents engage or are responsive during collaborative decision-making and service planning for their child. So there was an emphasis on collaboration with families. However, when those parents did not immediately align with or fully understand the service recommendations or implementation plans, their lack of responsiveness or hesitation was often interpreted as a barrier to the service delivery for their student. And so these interpretations of the team may reflect a broader systemic tension between school team operations and parents who may be less familiar with its processes and the culture driving those school-based services. And then finally, under this theme, the complexity of the OT role. So this is defined as the multifaceted and dynamic nature of the school-based OT practice, which involves navigating those overlapping responsibilities, the evolving professional roles, and varying team expectations, legal frameworks, and the diverse needs of those students. There is a limited awareness or misconception about OT in schools, which, as I said, can lead to the underutilization or inappropriate expectations. The third theme was the functional structural constraints. So in the data, this was defined as institutional elements that influence decision-making and limit the ability to operate efficiently or be supportive of best practice. A sub-theme was the team behaviors related to those functional structural constraints. So these are linked to non-obligatory functional structural constraints, and this was most apparent in the functional structural constraint guiding the establishment of team meeting times. So functional constraints driven by team behaviors were evident in the team's interpretation of those family behaviors. Specifically, when those families missed those appointments or were perceived to lack follow-through, the team interpreted the family as non-compliant and considered their behavior a barrier to care. So furthermore, the data suggested a lack of team clarity regarding why parents might be missing meetings or appear non-compliant. Conversely, families often expressed that confusion about expectations and frequently do not understand the needs driving those school-based OT referrals. And families perceived guidance regarding their expectations within the team as minimal until those formal meetings took place to discuss student success. And then there was obligatory versus organizational functional structural constraints and their influence on school-based processes. So obligatory functional structural constraints are legal driven, and these are dictated by those educational laws governing the overarching activities of school-based teams. Organizational constraints include the meeting required timelines to respond to referrals, assess the student, meet with the family, and establish a plan limited scheduling flexibility. And then the influence of these functional structural constraints on the school-based OT role refers to the non-obligatory functional structural constraint linked to the management of school-based OT work demands, including the scheduling, assessment timelines, and treatment session management. School-based OT schedules were based on a coverage across multiple schools, not student team needs. So this led to a team perception that school-based OT's unavailability influenced how the team communicated or considered the OT in the team meetings or referrals. Finally, the last theme was the stakeholders of school-based occupational therapy. So this refers to the parents of a student receiving related services and any other person identified as part of the team for the building in which those services are provided. This included the sub-theme fine motor as a gateway to school-based OT. So this refers to the functional structural qualification parameter for accessing those school-based services. OT informants suggested that the scope of OT services is substantially limited in school settings and often marginalized to the domain of fine motor control. However, it may not be as marginalized as the functional structural constraint might suggest because of observations I had of school-based OT treatment sessions where there was an incorporation of those root cause concerns. And this leads into the nature of the school-based OT needs. So this is the awareness of the school-based OT practitioner that motor control is frequently not the root cause of concern and is not a factor influencing those students' ability to access their education. Rather, it's behavior-based concerns, executive function, and sensory processing needs. So why does this matter and what is this data telling us? It's telling us that when implemented with rigor and fidelity, MTSS enables a proactive rather than a reactive approach to a student's support by promoting that early identification of needs and equitable access to resources and interventions across all three tiers. By emphasizing inclusive practices and shared responsibility, the framework facilitates coordinated efforts among professionals from various disciplines, including school-based OT practitioners, to address those academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs of all students school-wide. This provides the opportunity to target more students with evidence-based solutions, even before qualifying for those Tier 3 services. So MTSS empowers school-based OT practitioners to step beyond the confines of individualized, deficit-based, pull-out method service delivery and expand their scope of practice to contribute to universal design and small group interventions. It also matters because the purpose of school-based services are to support access to education for all children, whether that's physically accessing the space or cognitive and emotional ability to attend, persist, and learn. And the failure to fully accommodate family availability is represented by the norm of scheduling all meetings within rigid school day hours. So instead of families having the opportunity to feel empowered to co-create solutions, families often perceive themselves as overlooked or underrepresented in team-based decision-making processes. So when family perspectives are not fully integrated due to structural or systemic barriers, the effectiveness and inclusivity of MTSS and interdisciplinary collaboration is diminished. And so while functional structural constraints are often an inevitable byproduct of compliance, they demand ongoing critical reflection to ensure that services remain inclusive, equitable, and genuinely collaborative. And then it matters because there's a research to practice gap, and it is apparent in the school-based OT world. So there is a lack of evidence-based tools and interventions specific to school-based OT service delivery, which presents a challenge in supporting the full breadth of school-based OT to fully address those components of the person, environment, and occupation. And approaches to school-based OT have changed very little since the initiation of school-based services, as birth outcomes have changed drastically. And while current research supports school-based OT engagement in proactive Tier 1 and Tier 2 services through that collaborative, classroom-embedded, and system-level intervention, the findings of this study demonstrated that practice continues to be predominantly deficit-based and individualized, often limited to those Tier 3 pull-out services. So this limited application not only underutilizes the expertise of school-based OT practitioners, but also restricts the profession's potential to utilize the full scope of OT in support of school-wide needs. So, in modern times, access to education needs are most frequently related to executive functioning and behavioral concerns. And tests of motor skills will not identify students' needs with executive functioning deficits. So, selecting assessment tools most appropriate to the child is key to qualifying for services and directing best practice intervention plans. So, the outcome of this, school-based OT are widely recognized as valuable in meeting educational access of students. So we need to gain a better understanding of how a student is functioning across all domains represented in the OT practice framework, and that will position a school-based OT practitioner to design treatment plans that reflect best practice. In doing so, also positions the student to maximally access and benefit from the education that is their legal right to do so. School-based OTs are encouraged to become skilled in the MTSS framework and to reflect on how they can provide those proactive services in tiers 1 and 2 and not just tier 3 to fully utilize their skills and expertise. And this will in turn have downstream effects on student success related to long-term outcomes in adulthood. Thank you.
We do it.
Haley, this is really a neat project as well, and it's kind of cool to hear the 3 presenters so far almost building a model from birth all the way through. This is really great work, y'all. The question I had, one, I love how you said attend, persist, and learn, and executive functioning, and oftentimes the gateway is that fine motor referral. It sounds like what you're really working on is trying to empower OTs to be more persistent in screening for that executive function need. How, is there any connections of barriers for reimbursement and goal writing when it is often heavily driven on that fine motor idea?
Right. I didn't look into the reimbursement or the goal writing. I was just really looking at that referral source. So that is another project that I can go into and look into. Yes.
I can always have a follow-up question too, but I don't want to take all of our time and everything. As far as when you were looking at the process for the referrals, when you're using the model, and forgive me, the acronyms eluded me right there, but the model that you're looking at, is that where we're taking that to those support systems and asking for those referrals to be able to provide that executive functioning care? Or are you saying that the OTs really are the ones driving the referrals, say, and identifying? I don't know if that question made sense or not. It's the identification of the student need. Is it coming top down or from us up?
More from us up, because school personnel may not fully understand our scope, because that's why we're so marginalized in that fine motor, and that's why that's just the gateway that we use. And so then it's coming from us. So yeah, bottom up. And, yeah.
Other questions?
So you mentioned collaboration with school psychiatrists. Is there collaboration with school counselors?
Very little. There in the school I was at, in the suburban school, that school counselor was just in charge of 504 plans. So I didn't have much collaboration with him either. That would be.
Other questions? I would say the importance of, thank you, Haley.
Yes.
The importance of Haley's work is, you might have seen us kind of chuckling when she brought up MTSS. MTSS is sort of this nebulous thing that's been out there for a long time, but nobody really seems to get it. Is that right, Celia? Celia's doing her capstone work in a related area. So this study, we are really hoping will help illuminate why it is that we're not operating with the MTS framework the way that it's been intended, despite the fact that it's been around for a couple of decades now. And it's really a reflection of how difficult it is for a culture to shift, because as Haley pointed out, most services are still happening at Tier 3, which is exactly what we were doing before MTSS. So there's that research to practice gap, and the idea that we can have a thought about how to improve something and how it really ends up being improved is another nod to the important role of the practice scholar. We need therapists out there that are studying this, have opinions about it, and can help us actually actualize the vision. I have to give Haley a shout out also. You might have heard the baby in the background. It's actually her baby. So kudos to you, Haley, for being able to put your mommy brain on hold for just a moment. And thank you, Renly, for hanging in there. All right. Our next presenter is Chelsea McClammer. From the beginning of her academic journey, Chelsea has been driven by a clear goal to become a researcher. Through the support of the University of Pittsburgh's Department of Rehabilitation Science and Technology, her site mentor, Dr. Mark Schlemmer, an accomplished occupational therapist and researcher, and her content expert and former Whitworth faculty mentor, Corey Morrow, Chelsea has taken important steps towards realizing that goal. Her capstone work involved a collaborative data analysis exploring geographical differences in access to wheelchairs, an issue with wide-reaching implication for equitable care. She further developed advanced clinical skills in wheelchair assessments and seating and positioning services, which is a skill that is sorely needed but not very well realized among physical therapists or occupational therapists. It really is a specialty area. So please welcome Chelsea. Hold on, Chelsea, we lost your...
For a while.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go and pull it from you.
Sorry, I sent that to you kind of late.
Maybe Justin, is that okay?
I think it's okay. Yeah. Am I too loud?
Well, it does.
Okay.
Always have a backup. You always have to have a backup. Here we go. Oh, did you make this?
Oh, I think it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'll adjust it. Yeah, I'll do it. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Hello, thank you for coming to my presentation. My manuscript is on exploring manual wheelchair provision trends for persons with mobility disabilities. And although the bulk of my presentation will be discussing my manuscript, my goal is to articulate how my doctoral capstone experience, or DCE, influenced this area of research, and how I aim to contribute to the evidence base to improve mobility-related health outcomes. My mentors for this DCE were Dr. Mark Schlemmer, for the community site mentor. He provided guidance and expertise in seating and mobility practice and policies. Dr. Corey Morrow, who, for agreeing to be the second author on this manuscript and providing vast amounts of data that drive policy change. Dr. Lorianne Helgeson, who kept me motivated and on track throughout my entire doctoral journey, and Dr. Donna Mann, who ensured my DCE was established and carried out smoothly. So the key topics, I will first discuss my DCE and my process and my experience of being there. Then I'll talk about the journal that I'm submitting my manuscript to. And then I will talk about my deliverables. So I'll cover background, methods, results, discussion, and recommendations, and then the overall outcome of my DCE. So I was at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, Center for Assistive Technology, or UPMC CAT. My site mentor there, Dr. Mark Schmaler. I also worked with a lot of OTs, PTs, and assistive technology professionals, or ATPs. And while I was there, I gained expertise in seating and mobility. I participated both in-clinic evaluations and deliveries, and I also audited an assistive technology policy course taught by Dr. Schmaler. And I wanted to highlight my experience at the CAT to emphasize the importance of these facilities. So CATs typically house teams of medical professionals specializing in seating and mobility and other assistive technologies. At the UPMC CAT, where I was, individuals with mobility impairments would arrive for their appointments with the in-house physician, discuss their mobility concerns and their disability status, and then they would be directly referred to an in-house OT or PT who specializes in seating and mobility, and see them that day for a seating and mobility evaluation. During that appointment, they're fitted for a mobility device with an ATP there to record measurements and start the order for a device. Once the device is ordered, approved by insurance, and manufactured, the device user will then return to UPMC CAT for the delivery process. And that includes receiving the device, getting final adjustments and by the clinician and the ATP, and sometimes even the vendor, and receiving training on the device before being discharged. Oh, I don't know how to scroll. Sorry. I figured it out. My role there was to...
Did you want the next slide?
Nope.
Okay.
My role there was mainly to observe and learn and to develop my knowledge base. I did come into this setting with a knowledge base already established, but something that I did not have a lot of experience with was in powered mobility, so I learned a lot there. And I had additional opportunities to provide input in manual wheelchair specific measurements based off of my personal experience and based off the experience of a lot of people that I know. And I also had input on customizations for the wheelchair. And I was also consulted on wheelchair skills and device maintenance. And before I move on to my bonus experiences, something I wanted to highlight was the exciting part about my DCE in terms of the research aspect of it was being able to get access to raw quantitative data. Early in my DCE, I met with my mentor, Dr. Morrow, who has access to databases, and I was able to look at this raw data and based on my personal experience and knowledge, decide which aspects of the data were valuable and impactful for people with mobility disabilities, and then start the process of developing my manuscript. So on to my bonus experiences. These were not directly tied to my DCE, but they were still very closely related, especially with seating and mobility. So first I presented at the 2025 International Seating Symposium, which was in Pittsburgh, and I presented my manuscript that was published in June of last year, Telehealth for New Wheelchair Evaluations, and that was a short course, so the picture there is me on the stage with all the flags in the background. And then I also presented a poster at AOTA Inspire in Philly, and that was on Corey's research in powered mobility parts replacement. So the journal I'm submitting my manuscript to is Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. It's an international peer-reviewed interdisciplinary journal that explores all aspects of the occupation of work. Its primary focus is on preventing illness, injury, and disability, and when prevention is not possible, the journal emphasizes assessment and evidence-based interventions to support rehabilitation, treatment, and client-centered care. Okay, so on to the background of my deliverable. By 2024, approximately 6 million individuals used a wheelchair as their primary means of mobility. This growing population includes individuals with diverse clinical needs, and for many who rely on manual mobility full-time, properly fitted wheelchairs are critical to preventing injury and maintaining independence. According to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, an ultralight wheelchair classified as a K5 is considered medically necessary for individuals who require a wheelchair for full-time use and can independently and consistently propel it. Eligibility also depends on the individual's ability to benefit from specific ultralight features that promote safer and more ergonomic propulsion and seated positioning. These design features not only reduce the physical strain of propulsion, but also help prevent repetitive strain injuries and other secondary complications that are commonly experienced by long-term manual wheelchair users. So that includes carpal tunnel syndrome, rotator cuffs, pressure injuries, and scoliosis. Ultralights are most often prescribed to individuals with chronic and long-term mobility impairments. As ultralights are classified as complex rehab technology, or CRT, individuals must also complete a comprehensive seating and mobility evaluation conducted by a qualified clinician, so an OT or PT that specializes in this field, with an ATP, ensuring the device is medically necessary, appropriately fitted, and tailored to the user's daily needs. And in comparison, a lightweight wheelchair, classified as K3, are typically used by individuals who require mobility support on a part-time or intermittent basis. Although they weigh less than a standard manual wheelchair, so a standard wheelchair is like one that you would see in a hospital, they're typically under 36 pounds, and they, excluding the wheels, they offer limited adjustability and are not adequate to meet the performance needs of full-time wheelchair users. As lightweights are not classified as CRT, evaluation for this device does not require an ATP to be present. Although global disparities in access to assistive technology have received some attention in the literature, specific discrepancies in access to manual ultralight wheelchairs in the US remains underexplored. Access to healthcare in the US is highly influenced by geographic location, with rural populations consistently facing disparities in health outcomes, service availability, and access to specialized care. These systemic barriers include longer travel distances to providers, fewer practicing specialists, and lower health system investment per capita. And these all contribute to reduced outcomes for rural residents compared to their urban counterparts. One area where this disparity is particularly consequential is in the provision of mobility equipment, especially when prescribing CRT. So the purpose of my study, I had three main purposes. First, to examine the trends in Medicare claims for ultralight and lightweight wheelchairs, to describe the socio-demographic characteristics of the users, and then to explore access disparities based on ATP and CAT availability. This study was a retrospective cohort analysis, and it was designed analyzing the Access Mobility data set, which pulls from the 2013 to 2022 Centers for Medicare and Medicaid 5% limited data set. And so this is the one that Corey has access to, that I was able to analyze myself. We extracted all approved claims for lightweight and ultralight wheelchairs, keeping only the first approved claim per beneficiary per year. We compared groups by age, gender, race and ethnicity, dual eligibility Medicare Medicaid status, rural residency, and county-level ATP and CAT presence. And then the results were all stratified by the device type. The cohort included 54,146 lightweight wheelchair claims and 4,129 ultralight claims. Between 2013 and 2022, the number of lightweight approvals steadily declined, decreasing by nearly 60% over the decade. In contrast, ultralight approvals more than tripled. Most beneficiaries were over 65 years old, with the 76 to 85 age group comprising of about 32% of the lightweight group and 20% of the ultra lightweight group. Younger age groups, so under 55, represented a greater share of ultralight users than lightweight users, particularly those under 35. A higher proportion of full benefit dual eligibility Medicare and Medicaid individuals had approved claims for ultralight compared to lightweight wheelchairs. Most beneficiaries resided in large metropolitan areas, the higher proportion of ultralight users living in large metro counties. Ultralight users were also more likely to live in counties with a center for assistive technology and at least one ATP present. Lightweight claims were most frequent with individuals with osteoarthritis, COPD, stroke, and rheumatoid arthritis. And ultralight claims were most frequent with those with paraplegia, spina bifida, and quadriplegia. So for the discussion and recommendations, this study examined the manual wheelchair prescription trends among Medicare beneficiaries from 2013 to 2022, highlighting a major shift. Ultralight claims tripled, while lightweight claims declined by nearly 60%. And this likely reflects improved alignment with CRT guidelines and a growing recognition for ultralight wheelchairs as a medically necessary solution for long-term users. Notably, younger individuals, especially those under age 55, made up a greater share of ultralight users. These users often live with long-term conditions like spinal cord injury or spina bifida, requiring customized, efficient mobility solutions. In contrast, lightweight claims were more common among older adults with age-related impairments like stroke or arthritis. We also found higher dual eligibility rates among ultralight users, and this is consistent with research showing that younger dually eligible adults often have more complex mobility needs. Geographically, ultralight claims were concentrated in large metro areas where access to ATPs and CATs are more common. This points to ongoing disparities in rural access to appropriate mobility equipment and specialized care. These findings also highlight the need for policy efforts to address geographic gaps in mobility service delivery. Expanding specialized services to rural and underserved areas could help ensure all individuals receive the most appropriate equipment for their needs. An overall outcome of my DCE is that I developed expertise in seating mobility practice, both in manual and powered mobility. In receiving the DCE experience, I was better able to understand seating and mobility policy with the aim of achieving policy change, which then led to the development of the manuscript that explores manual wheelchair provision trends for persons with mobility disabilities. From this DCE and manuscript, I hope to advocate for more OTs specializing in seating and mobility, and even pursuing an ATP certification. I also hope to advocate for more OTs to provide services in rural areas to improve access to specialized care. A personal goal for the future that I have developed as a result of this DCE is to start a seating and mobility practice with a mobile option that is able to reach rural and underserved areas. Thank you.
Questions for Chelsea?
I'm so excited about your idea for mobility, a mobile option.
Yeah.
Having served in education in schools where those rural communities just have so many needs and so little access. So tell us more about that idea.
Yeah, so I had kind of this idea for this probably a year ago, but I guess I didn't explore the impact of it until my DCE. But I did start writing a grant to the Craig H. Nielsen Foundation that would cover a mobile unit to be able to start that process. But first, I would like to start a seating mobility practice, and that obviously starting your own practice requires a lot of work, and I need to get contracts with all of the insurance companies. But once that is underway, and obviously I have my license, so I would need to be licensed in Washington, Idaho, Oregon, maybe Montana. Then I can really start the practice of starting the mobile seating mobility clinic. Thank you.
Has been a big part of Parasport Spokane for a number of years and serves on the board. And so she's in a collaborative effort with Teresa Skinner, their program director, to really develop this high-need service design program, really filling a gap. Other questions for Chelsea?
Mine wasn't a question. It really, truly is a compliment and a thank you. As a rural practitioner, getting ATP to come to our clinics is a significant barrier, and it creates extensive wait times, and that also creates extensive trauma to the person waiting just to get their mobility needs addressed. And while we have occupational therapists in our rural settings, they're overwhelmed as well in providing the care. So this is a blessing to have this program, and I wish you all of the very best, and I cannot wait to have you come to our hospital. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yep.
Other questions? Comments? Thank you, Chelsea. Oh, wait. Did we have one?
I think that she's getting ready for the clap. She's just.
Oh, okay. All right. Our next presenter is Rebecca Marcinko. Thank you, new name. Rebecca's capstone focused on the therapeutic use of gardening as a meaningful occupation in the treatment of individuals with mild cognitive impairment and dementia. Equally committed to building sustainable community engagement, she set out to establish a network of collaborators in her hometown of Missoula, Montana. With guidance from her mentor, Dr. Jana Smith, and support from the University of Montana's new entry-level OTD program, Rebecca designed and conducted a mixed methods research project that explored both the clinical and communal impact of gardening as therapy. Key partnerships with Missoula Aging Services and the Missoula County Library's Memory Cafe played a vital role in bringing her project to life. Please welcome Rebecca. Emily, you should be proud of me.
This one right here.
Yeah. I think just my kind of right here. Straight up. There we go.
Then you don't have your notes. Is that okay?
All right. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Marcinko, and I will be presenting on community perspectives on dementia-friendly gardening. I'd like to send a special thank you to all of my mentors, Dr. Jana Smith, Dr. L'Oreal Helgeson, and Dr. Donna Mann for their leadership and expertise, and then also my long list of expertise mentors. They were all crucial in this process. I'd just like to share an overview of my manuscript. We are finding in the research that gardening is a beneficial activity for people with dementia, and that people with dementia often experience limited involvement in their communities and limited opportunities for social interaction. And so I conducted a survey to explore the community perspectives on programs that are geared towards involving people with dementia. And the results suggested that there's a strong support for dementia-friendly gardening within the Missoula community, where I live. But of course, there are barriers to participation that we identified, and those included the accessibility of the design, cognitive and physical deficits of someone with dementia, and limitations related to the participants' ability to leave their residence. And then this information was then used to redesign the current dementia-friendly program. Key topics that I'll be going over in this presentation are the growing impact of dementia in our communities, gardening as an opportunity for meaningful engagement, gaining that community perspective on dementia-friendly gardening, my survey results, of course, and then the outcomes of those survey results. And then I'd love to go into what we're designing for the 2026 dementia-friendly gardening program. My manuscript will be hopefully submitted here soon to the Journal of Occupational Therapy in Healthcare. And I really chose this journal because I felt that it propelled the field of occupational therapy in a very tangible way. So the growing impact of dementia. First, dementia is considered a syndrome. So it's a collection of diseases that cause damage to the brain. Globally, it is the 7th leading cause of death. In the US, we are expected to have 1 million new cases every year by the year 2060. And globally, the number of cases is expected to increase to 4.91 million by 2050. And of course, there is currently no cure for dementia. And so we treat it as healthcare professionals, both pharmaceutically and with non-pharmaceutical approaches. So, in line with those non-pharmaceutical approaches, we have gardening. These are two systematic review studies that I looked at that shared that gardening provides opportunities for sensory stimulation, gross and fine motor skills, and it can also be found to reduce agitation and improve emotional state. I just want to highlight two studies that were within these other two studies. One that found that when adults with dementia got involved in gardening, they reduced the number of as-needed medication for agitation and stress and anxiety. And then second was that when adults participated in gardening, oftentimes people with dementia can experience what's called sundowning, so an increased agitation state closer to bedtime. And just a real reduced, or what's a better word for it? Poor sleep-wake cycles. And so when exposed to UV light through gardening, we found an improvement in those sleep-wake cycles. And then community gardening can also provide opportunities for that social interaction piece that so many people with dementia are missing, and also potentially reduce community stigma around dementia. And so when we're trying to build a dementia-inclusive society, the World Health Organization has outlined a toolkit for doing so. One of the key principles for that is this idea of participation. And what that is gaining the experience and the input of people with dementia and their caregivers in any sort of initiation towards a dementia-inclusive society. So that was at the forefront of my brain when I reached out to Missoula Aging Services. They launched their dementia-friendly gardening program in 2023. And this program, after interviews with the founders of this program, really was the idea of one individual who had experience as a primary caregiver to someone with dementia, but they didn't entirely understand the whole community perspective. And so as a result of this, they felt that it was an underutilized program. And so what I sought to do is get that community perspective through a survey to understand what are the barriers to coming into this program and being an active participant. And so through our survey, I was able to gather 22 responses. These were both gathered from Missoula Aging Services and Missoula Public Library's Memory Cafe. So I want to note that these are organizations that people are coming to get involved in dementia-inclusive programs already, such as the Memory Cafe, which is sort of a social event for people with dementia. So the subjects that I was able to capture are already somewhat involved in their community and are already seeking out those opportunities to become more involved. And this is a breakdown of those 22 responses. So 12, the most, were the primary caregivers of someone with dementia. 2 were family or friends to someone with dementia. 1 was someone who had a mild cognitive impairment. One was someone with a diagnosis of dementia, one was someone interested in dementia, and then I had 4 that just responded as other, 3 of which identified themselves as professionals that interacted in some way with people with dementia, and then 1 was a prior caregiver to someone who had passed away from dementia. Here are our survey results. So most people were really excited about the idea of a dementia-friendly gardening in their community. And not only that, they identified that they liked both the passive and active opportunities that gardening had. So when we think of passive, we think of more of the sensations and the sensory aspect of gardening. And this is really ingrained in the idea of biophilia, which has been, is an idea that has been around since the 80s of just this love of nature, this need for human connection with nature, and how it can reduce stress and anxiety and just uplift certain moods and things. But also what was exciting for me as a prospective OT is that we wanted a more engaging dementia-friendly gardening program. And so things were identified like planting and weeding. In that other category, we had harvesting and different sorts of activities there. And no one wanted to mow the lawn. Additionally, subjects reported some of the aspects that would be important in the environment for their person or themselves. Things that we need to consider, like wide pathways that a wheelchair or walker could get through, seating areas for taking rest breaks, and shade areas, of course. In that other category was things like drinking water, air conditioning, and so on. And then furthermore, these are just to get a sense of what the community is going through and if this program would serve the community. 36.4% of participants reported feelings of social isolation because of cognitive decline. Now I want to break that down a little bit more. Of the primary caregivers, so someone who is caring directly for someone with dementia, 7 said, yes, I feel social isolation. 4 said maybe, which could also might be interpreted as sometimes, and only 1 said no. 54.5% of participants reported difficulty with leaving their place of residence, and that'll come up later, and half of participants reported difficulty interacting with their community. And to anticipate these barriers, I also asked, would you be willing to have a volunteer come to your house to participate in gardening activities? And most people liked that idea. And only 13.6% of participants were aware of the current dementia-friendly gardening programs. And again, most people who were polled from the organization who was hosting the program. I also had some qualitative evidence come when I asked what challenges do you or the person you care for have that would impact your ability to participate in a gardening program. And we had 2 themes arise from that question. One of them, and the majority, fell into the client factor theme, and that was defined as the cognitive, physical, and motivational factors of either the person with dementia, the caregiver, or both. And so, to highlight this is one quote. The person I care for had a large garden her entire life and frequently talks about wanting to plant vegetables, but ability to focus and diminishing motivation would be a challenge. Additionally, she misses her garden. It's impossible to predict her interest in gardening someplace other than the garden at her home, in her memories that she misses deeply. The second theme that arose was barriers to transportation. And this was defined as both the location and the act of transitioning from residence to the gardening location. Most answers that fell within this theme were very vague, and so I couldn't understand, was it the barriers to access for transportation? Did they not have a car themselves or no public transportation? Or was it that the physical act of going from place of residence to somewhere else was difficult and causing stress? And so to highlight kind of that vague answer, this was the most in-depth answer I had, was getting there would be the biggest challenge. And these are the outcomes from that survey. The community is interested in an engaging and active program. We can take that away. And furthermore, we need to design a garden space that needs to meet the physical needs of participants. So I did have one client that said, I think this was a family member of someone with dementia. They said, oh yeah, they're unable to participate. When asked why, they're in a wheelchair. I'm like, well, we can overcome that very easily. And then this is also an opportunity for occupational therapists and other healthcare professionals to really dive in, because we are so well suited to meet the needs of people with dementia and to find new ways to scale activities up and down in order to engage them. So facilitation by an OT or another healthcare professional could definitely overcome some of the cognitive and motivational deficits that might be experienced by someone with dementia, and certainly could be well utilized in the design aspect of a community gardening program. And then to overcome transportation challenges, this garden should be offered in a centrally located space. So it's not too difficult. The current one that Missoula Aging Services offers is on the opposite side of town from where most people live, and that was identified specifically by someone who had engaged in the gardening space, that was just too much of a journey. And we might look into, later on down the road, hybrid gardening programs with a virtual aspect, which is something that Missoula Aging Services already offers, a kind of a virtual social gathering, and so using that same structure to implement a gardening program. And then again, advertisement of the conscious efforts to design this gardening program for people with dementia specifically can sway that stakeholder influence. So again, that client who said, my person with dementia is unable to because they're in a wheelchair, we need to advertise this program has been specifically designed for someone to meet all of their needs. So laying the foundation, using this information for the current and the future dementia-friendly community gardening. I did not just do a survey for 14 weeks. I did 7 sessions of client-tested activities. So these are the hands of my willing participant. Him and his wife would come for about an hour every week, and we would trial run all of the gardening activities that I could think of that might be used in a gardening, in a dementia-friendly gardening program. And so they're all client tested. And I was able to get feedback after each activity, and some of the most wonderful feedback I received was his wife reported that he had mentioned that he was excited that what he was doing was going to be implemented and help so many people down the road. And then from there, we were able to host 2 larger workshops as well. So to the Memory Cafe, we were able to host a workshop, and then Rocky Mountain Gardens, or Missoula County Department of Ecology and Extension, also let us host a smaller workshop. And this was designed to see how well a gardening program would be utilized in a larger group setting. Third, I networked a lot with the University of Montana's OTD program specifically, and then also Missoula County Department of Ecology and Extension, and I'll explain how those 2 are involved a little bit later. And then finally, I was able to design a protocol for a 10-week Level 1 fieldwork program for University of Montana's upcoming occupational therapy students. So this is an example from that protocol of one of the activities. And so I outlined the materials that would be needed, the instructions, how to scale the activity depending on someone's cognitive needs, and then other considerations that might affect someone who's a little bit older or has different physical needs. And so this is a picture to kind of outline how all of these different entities are going to work together. And so the OTD students will be facilitating this program and running it using my protocol. And so this will give them great experience into how to interact with someone with dementia and how to meet their needs. And likewise, the people with dementia and their caregivers will benefit from having students leading the program, but also they will be able to share those lived experiences with someone who is about to enter into the healthcare field and very well might be interacting with someone with dementia. Missoula County Department of Ecology and Extension is a very exciting new site in Missoula. They have something called the Rocky Mountain Gardens, which has graciously agreed to host our program. And so they will be the centrally located site. They are already ADA accessible. They have air conditioning, they have a bathroom, and they have drinkable water. So we are good to go there, and they are awesome for it. And then Missoula Aging Services will help to promote this program and help us reach community dwelling adults that might not already be interacting with dementia-focused community programs. And this is our vision. Well, I'll highlight this photo. This was the workshop at the Memory Cafe that I led. But our vision for this program is our community gardening program envisions a nurturing and inclusive space where individuals with dementia and their caregivers can connect with nature, engage in meaningful activities, and foster a sense of belonging. Facilitated by occupational therapy students, this program creates a reciprocal learning environment where students gain invaluable insights from the lived experiences of those with dementia, while participants benefit from the students' support and social connection. Our hope is that through this program, we can end stigma and uplift and value our neighbors with dementia. Thank you.
Questions for Rebecca? Should I just come to you? Yes. We count on it.
This is outstanding.
Thank you.
I'm very excited. Of course, you know, wildly biased about fieldwork and level 1 protocol. Wonderful. A part of our ACOT standards is that all students have a rotation in mental health, and including those going through a cognitive decline process. So you are promoting a really wonderfully engaging level 1 rotation. My question is, is this going to be a faculty run vision, or are your community partners providing the supervision, or is it you?
Right, so I believe in the first year I am running the program along with my mentor, Dr. Janice Smith, who is the academic fieldwork coordinator at so we're collaborating in kind of leading the charge there. Rocky Mountain Gardens is purely facilitating, but this aligns well with their mission of kind of becoming very inclusive. So they already have garden spaces that are set up like for sensory needs of the community. I think they have spaces they're trying to use for like educating elementary school kids. And so this aligns well with their mission as well. And then Missoula Aging Services, kind of just that backup support. But as of right now, leading the charge is myself and Dr. Smith. And then University of Montana is going to float the bill.
Will you be publishing your protocol for other fieldwork coordinators to use as a model?
I have to look into that a little bit more because while I did design the protocol for level 1 fieldworks and like very specifically what the University of Montana's fieldwork should look like, their structure, I also was able to find like so many resources on dementia gardening, and so I need to look into whether or not there's too much overlap, or if my protocol is different enough to feel ethical publishing. I definitely found quite a few activities that were like specifically geared towards someone with dementia, which is incredible to find that out there online as a resource. Yeah.
For Rebecca. Yes, I think academia might be in Rebecca's future. All right. Bringing up the conclusions is our next presenter, Alicia Bolarde. Alicia, like many OT students, is drawn to working with high-risk infants. So we're going to take you back to the neonatal intensive care unit, particularly in the area of feeding therapy. But her passion extends beyond clinical care. She's also deeply committed to supporting the families of medically fragile infants, seeking to understand their lived experiences and helping them make the transition from the neonatal intensive care unit to community-based services as smooth and supportive as possible. Her doctoral capstone experience took a two-pronged approach. With the guidance of her site mentor, Dr. Randy Nuxel, Alicia began her work in the NICU at Providence Holy Family. Oops, wrong page. She then collaborated, or Dr. Nuxel then collaborated with Alicia's second site mentor, Eden White, who is a speech-language pathologist at Stepping Stones Pediatric Therapy, who specializes in the feeding needs of medically fragile infants. Together, they helped create a comprehensive and impactful capstone experience that fulfilled both of Alicia's professional goals. Alicia's capstone project reflects how the DCE can serve to launch a career when the focus is specialized care. Please join Alicia. Are we doing okay?
Hello. Just want to start. If you guys feel like you're having deja vu, don't think about it, because apparently Sophia and I wrote very similar papers unknowingly. My presentation, this wasn't my original plan. We kind of last minute changed it up. I originally planned to look at the transition from the NICU, and there was the role of the early intervention, but things happen. The NICU can be a traumatic experience, and the survey didn't pan out. So we kind of transitioned very rapidly into using the capstone experience as a guide for students, faculty, community mentors, anybody who would benefit from this knowledge. Just with the OTD being so new, we don't all know what we're supposed to be doing in this role and how we can best serve our students, our faculty, and all parties involved. So again, deja vu, forget about it. It didn't happen before. Many thanks to Randy, my site mentor in the NICU. She works at both Providence Holy Family and Sacred Heart, so I was in a level 4 NICU and a level 2 special care nursery with her. She is also a co-author, put in her voice as a site mentor on my manuscript. Eden White is where I transitioned to the last 7 weeks of my experience in early intervention, specifically to learn feeding, because in our NICUs here, OTs focus a lot on feeding, and then the PTs do a lot of the positioning. So feeding plays a crucial role in the NICU, and so not only to learn feeding skills, but also the continuity of care. And I was fortunate enough to see some of those NICU babies as they transitioned to early intervention. So I saw that full continuation of care. Big thanks to Dr. Helgeson. She always made sure, checked in, even if I didn't need her, she was there. And then of course, Dr. Donna Mann, I couldn't have done this without her. I almost had 1,200 panic attacks. So big thank you to her, and also being a co-author on the paper, giving her point of view as a capstone coordinator. So the plan is to submit this to OT practice. Like I said, this doesn't only benefit students as a guide to the steps we can take to get into the NICU for the DCE, but also hopefully it can serve capstone coordinators, fieldwork coordinators, students, the site mentors, anybody, any of the parties involved in a capstone. In hopes it's going to benefit them. So kind of an overview. The aim of this manuscript that I wrote was to kind of bridge the gap between academic preparation and then a specialized area of practice. In this case, it would be the NICU. And then using the DCE as a direct line to the NICU if it's not accessible otherwise. The overall aim of this DCE, my personal aim, was to gain those advanced clinical practice skills, build that foundation in NICU care, understand the continuity of care not only from the NICU, but as I previously mentioned, in early intervention settings, and then just generally the role of OT in the NICU. You can read about it in all these papers. I don't know how many of you learn best by just reading knowledge, but seeing and doing is how I learn best. So translating what I've read in articles and evidence and into what OTs do in the NICU. So kind of just to cover what we're going to go over today, I'm going to introduce the manuscript, the goals here, going to hone in on OT in the NICU, how I personally prepared and how I think it will help other students, faculty, anybody involved preparing for a DCE in the NICU, and then the outcomes that I had from this project. So going into the introduction, my ACOTE focus area for this was clinical practice skills. Like I said, I wanted to learn those advanced clinical skills that you don't often learn in general OT education, so the best way to do that was to do clinical practice skills. I wasn't able, with Sacred Heart and their policies, I wasn't able to be as hands-on as others might be in a NICU, but I was able to observe, collaborate, guide treatment planning, and all the other things involved, just with limited hands-on because they do see a lot of young babies in a level 4 NICU. So kind of just honing in here on the gap, the NICU is a highly protective environment that has extremely limited student learning opportunities due to the morally complex considerations and skills that you need to have as a practitioner. And oftentimes becoming a part of a NICU team can require mentoring that takes 6 to 12 months depending on your current knowledge that you have going into the NICU setting and then just how your skills advance. There are policies in place, like I said, I wasn't able to be hands-on that protect this vulnerable population. So learning these advanced expertise and the clinical practice skills as a guide to a future career in the NICU. And then in the research, there isn't much knowledge of using, just in general, not even related to the NICU, using a DCE as a guide to get to a specialized setting, even if it's not related to the NICU, it's another highly protective environment. It can be a challenge to get there, so we can collaborate, in my case, with the NICU team, occupational therapists, to receive that direct support, that direct mentoring, to learn those skills that we otherwise don't learn in advanced or in the general OT education. So kind of jumping further into my goals and what I was hoping to get out of this experience. Like I said, you read about all of these in the articles and in the, whatever, but seeing it hands-on is a completely different thing. So my primary goals of this were to learn OT in the NICU, how to promote the parent-infant bonding skills, the sensory regulation that these infant needs, because they're exposed to so much at such a young age when otherwise they're protected in a womb. The feeding skills that they need to be able to get out of the NICU. Oftentimes they turn from a very complex case into a feeder grower that they just need to learn how to eat by mouth. They need to hit their weight marks and then get out of there. The neurodevelopment, and then the biggest one is minimizing the stress because they are being exposed to such cruel environments, even if we keep them very protected. And these interventions require continuous assessment. If you aren't seeing this baby every day, you're seeing them every other, and the leaps and bounds and the jumps that they're making in just so limited time, you're continuously assessing that using a dynamic approach with those specialized skills that you learn throughout the career. So the limited access to the NICU for level 2 fieldwork students is crazy. As Sophia said, I met the same student at NANT this year that she did a level 2 placement, but otherwise I have not heard of that ever happening. So she's a very fortunate girl. But for those of us who can't have level 2 placements, how can we use the DCE to get that experience that we want? And this can be done through collaboration, not only with our capstone coordinator, but our fieldwork coordinator as well, to prepare us the best we can following our fieldworks going into the DCE. So kind of the thought behind that is we are doing our DCE following the completion of our level 2 fieldworks. Following those fieldworks, depending on the location you're in, you're considered to have skills equivalent of entry-level therapist in that setting that you did your level 2 fieldwork. So how can we maximize that opportunity to best prepare ourselves for the NICU? This started for me in my very first year when Dr. Gliniak was the current academic fieldwork coordinator. She's now former, but I asked her, I was like, how can I get there? And she was like, you're not gonna be able to do it in fieldwork, but here's what we can do. So she, very early on, secured a placement for me in an adult acute care, and I was able to go into intensive care. And Dr. Kirkpatrick also made sure that that stayed relevant, and I was able to attend that placement, thankfully. But in an acute care and intensive care units, you learn how to manage those lines, you learn the medical precautions, you learn the collaborative interdisciplinary environment. You're constantly co-treating with OT, PT, SLP, whoever is on the case, and then most importantly, monitoring those vital signs in the ICU, keeping close eye on those signs as they play a crucial role to whether you're stopping therapy at all or if you proceed with caution, who knows. These skills, while it is adults, they do translate to things in the NICU. Managing those lines is crazy. These babies oftentimes potentially could have an IV from their head. They could have oxygen, they could have CPAP, all of these lines. So even though they're much smaller human, it still translates to managing those lines. And then a second placement in outpatient pediatric settings. Again, making sure I had this from the start, that I wanted my 2 rotations, my level 2s in these settings. So in an outpatient setting, you learn those developmental milestones. If you're fortunate enough, you may get to do some infant handling and infant care throughout. And then also, crucially, the communication with the caregivers or the parents involved, because oftentimes in the NICU, you could be doing your treatment sessions with a parent or caregiver present. So how can we communicate what we're doing and what we're seeing in a way that they would understand? So crucial environments. And then other settings is a pediatric acute care and then an early intervention setting. I was fortunate enough during my time in the NICU that I did spend a few days over on the Children's Hospital side, learning just how we flow, and it's much like adult acute care, but you're ranging from an infant to a 17-year-old. So that was a very crucial, just seeing, yes, it is important, but also this translates into older life. So following some of those babies as I left the NICU, going to the PICU was a great skill to have. And then another way that we can prepare for going into this specialty practice is just getting involved with the community that supports it. So for the NICU, that would be the National Association of Neonatal Therapists. They offer a student rate for not only conference, but also membership. And we are fortunate that our capstone aligns with when their conference takes place. So I was able to attend this year to not only gain the benefits of networking and communicating with other students that are, in other programs across the country, but also learn those best practices and the emerging skills for the NICU and keep up to date on that information. And with that, it also benefited my capstone. We're required, I don't even remember the number at this point, however many off-site hours that weren't directly related to our capstone, and that went to those off-site hours, which was great. So the outcomes for this, you get an experienced neonatal therapist, whether they're a certified neonatal therapist or they have years of practice. Specifically for me, my mentor had 14 years of OT experience, 7 dedicated to the NICU, and that was bouncing between the level 2 special care nursery and a level 4 NICU. And then this also jumps to, it starts early on. You create this path early on. If you know you want to go to the NICU, then this starts year 1 in the program, and it doesn't happen with just yourself. You need everybody to help you get to where you want to be. Like I said, I started early on. I was able to get there and then add the additional components that I wanted. The largest emphasis throughout my time in both settings, I was in the NICU and early intervention, was in understanding a typical development from whatever gestation, 22, 21 weeks gestation, all the way to 40, 46 weeks. Just because if you understand how an infant should typically develop within that gestation, you would be able to easily identify where they are atypically developing and how we can jump in and use our skills as therapists to help this child get to where they need to be. And then also learning methods, like I said, some, depending on where you are in the hospital policies, you may be able to be hands-on. For me personally, it was through structured observation, interdisciplinary collaboration, helping guide treatment planning, and then also diving into the evidence in my offsite time just to keep up to date. And, if I had questions, I would answer them myself. And a big emphasis on the interdisciplinary collaboration. I not only spent time on the peds acute care floors, I spent time with neonatologists, lactation consultants, respiratory therapists. They took me to live births. I saw babies be born and then saw the admission process to the NICU all the way through discharge. So it wasn't just that my experience was focused on OT in the NICU. I got to see how the whole team works together and how we get this baby doing the best that they can in this, whatever is occurring, whether they were born early or, they have a genetic condition. So I'm extremely blessed that that was an opportunity that I had. And then just overall, the exposure to the complexity of NICU care, it's not something that, you see in an ICU. You're in an ICU, you're working with an 18-year-old to a 90-year-old, but the complexity of having potentially an infant less than 1,000 grams that you have to manage. So just being able to see that, get that early on exposure, the early on exposure to the NICU to eventually use those skills and work your way there. So moving on to further outcomes, like I said, the collaborations that I had, big emphasis on the interdisciplinary collaboration, but also with the families, like seeing how they're doing, what supports can we provide them, how can we educate them in a way that they understand. And then another goal that I had was just understanding OT's role. Like you can read it, but seeing that and watching that family-centered care and figuring how can we regulate this infant that is 30 weeks gestation was amazing. And then just the setting alone provides a high acuity experience. You build the foundation of that specialized knowledge that you need to have. This is a unique opportunity that we as doctoral students have, because in a master's program, you don't have this 14-week experience to further specialize in an area that you may want to, that may take you 5 years to get to outside of or once you're practicing. So the overarching outcome of this DCE was to find a way that we can shorten the path to a career in the NICU with the early exposure to the NICU in the DCE, and start building the foundation that is required in those clinical practice skills that we need. Oh, wrong way. Questions?
This is really excellent work as well. Thank you for your presentation. I, of course, think about fieldwork, and what you have provided is a valuable resource for academic fieldwork coordinators, particularly new academic fieldwork coordinators that are navigating. But what you just provided is a wonderful stepwise progression to work with the student in that advisory model when we're planning your fieldworks, to get that ICU taken care of or addressed or get you placed in that, and then be able to have pediatrics so you get the full kind of lifespan perspective, and then those level 2s in a hospital setting, so you have all of that real roundedness, and then also your own planning for conferences, which also helps for student occupational therapy associations. I'm not sure if you're planning to disseminate that in your OT practice, but I would love to encourage you to write up that pathway, recommended pathways for academic fieldwork coordinators to consider in advising and planning for their students who have a passion for getting access to this area. It's really well thought. Yeah, there's your second. Okay.
Yeah, that's my next one.
Not necessarily a question, but just really wanted to let you know, thank you for doing that work.
Of course, thank you.
I think the differences between Sophia and Alicia's, although the topic is the same and a lot of the content is the same, is OT Practice magazine, we call it in our profession, is consumed at a much higher frequency than a lot of the journals. So a lot of times as professionals, we kind of use OT practice as our springboard or a way for us to stay kind of current on what's happening new in the field. And so those two different pathways for where we're publishing and the slight nuances of tact, where Sophia's was more thinking about how an academic program can structure itself, and Alicia's was, as Bonnie pointed out, thinking more about how the fieldwork experiences themselves can be structured to really jumpstart that career in specialized setting. There are important nuanced differences there. We want to thank you, all of you today, for sharing your remarkable work with us, and if you could come up here as we do our final remarks, we would appreciate it. Photo opportunity for those that are interested. We'll wait for Renly and Haley to join us as well. I'll talk as you're joining us, Haley. Really, each of you, including Renly, who attended many data analysis sessions, now knows my voice, I think. Each of you has demonstrated not only academic excellence, but also a profound commitment to advancing the field of occupational therapy through thoughtful professional development, meaningful project, and research activities. Today's presentations highlight the incredible potential of the entry-level occupational therapy doctorate program at Whitworth to prepare practice scholars. You are now practice scholars, congratulations, who will shape the future of our profession. Your dedication, creativity, and scholarship will serve as an inspiration for the students who follow. We also want to extend our gratitude to the faculty, the site mentors, our community partners, those of you that took the time to be with us here today, families most certainly and crucially, who have supported these students throughout their capstone experiences. Your support, guidance, and collaboration are truly invaluable to their success. Thank you all for being here to celebrate this important milestone with us. We look forward to witnessing the continued impact Whitworth OTD scholars will make in their communities and in the broader field of occupational therapy. And we invite you to visit with them today and with the faculty and with one another prior to leaving this afternoon. And we invite you to join us next May. Our cohort, this is the only cohort that will be doing this process in the summer. We've already had a curricular adjustment, so now students will complete this process, yes, pointing to you, complete this process in May. So we hope that some, if not all of you, can join us in May of next year when our next cohort will disseminate their scholarly work. And when you do leave us today, we wish you safe travels. Thank you so much.